In the Buddha, the Dharma, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent. I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent. I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chodam la Zhangzhu baidu dagni kapsu chi Dagi jinso ki pe sonam yi Drola penshu sangye ju pa sho. May all mother beings, may all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem chen tam she de wadang dewe gurdang dembar jurchi. Dugnal dang dunal gi gudang drawa jorchi. Dugnal me pe de wadang mi drawa jorchi. Nay ring chak dang ni dang drelway twang namla ne pa jorchi. Okay, thank you for being here tonight, and thank people online joining with YouTube. So we're continuing with the Lalitavistara. We're on chapter 21. So does anybody have any comments or questions about anything that we've talked about in the past? I know Matt has been away, so if you have any questions, Matt, that'd be fine. Everything's recorded, so you can go back and take a look at things. It's been very interesting. These chapters here have been very, very good. This chapter 21, does anybody have any comment or question? Okay. So chapter 21 is conquering Mara. So we're looking at the bodhisattva who is now under the sitting underneath the meditation tree, the tree of enlightenment, as it's called, in Gaia, and he's come down out of the caves and so on, and so now he's gone into a meditation, and during this meditation, Mara has rised up, has arisen, and is trying to persuade the bodhisattva to leave his seat, the seat of awakening, as it's called here in the text, to leave the seat and go and become a great human being, but to only be a human being, to give up his position, to be able to serve Mara. And so this is what Mara's trying to do. So we left it at 21.200 is where we left off. But just to review and to get us into the sequence, and maybe it's something that we didn't talk about last time, but just to try and put some things more into perspective, we starting at 2192 begins these 16 ways in which the gods were getting involved, and trying to persuade Mara to leave the bodhisattva more or less alone so that he can awaken to enlightenment. So the gods are talking to the Mara and trying to do that. So they're trying to break Mara's resolve, is the way it says here. So there's 16 points that they're trying to do this. And so I think a question that we should ask ourselves is, what is the point of expressing the pure realm gods? What is the point of expressing the pure realm gods? In other words, where is this taking place? Where is Mara? Where is Mara arising? Is Mara arising outside? Is it and confronting the bodhisattva? Anybody have a comment?
I do. So from my perspective, well, I mean, he's deep in meditation, so obviously it's an internal struggle going on within his own consciousness. And I think of the one is kind of reactive, like Mara brings his troops and attacks, and the Buddha responds. And then when the gods come in and tell Mara to back off, it's kind of proactive. Instead of waiting for the negative feeling, the negative aspects to come up, the Buddha consciously enacts the positive attributes. So we talk about the Buddha, identifying antidotes to different negative qualities. So here, instead of an antidote, it's like it's like the doctor telling you to versus when the doctor can either tell you to take a medication because you already have a symptom, or the doctor can prescribe an activity to avoid getting the symptom in the first place. And I feel like when the gods are speaking, it's kind of like more proactive, like you generate these positive activities, and then the negative, you won't have to deal with, reacting against the negative elements when they come up, because you're practicing the positive. Thank you.
So Mara is within the mind of the bodhisattva,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So where are the gods?
Same place.
Right, yeah. So it says here in the text, if we're looking at 21.192, it says right in the first line, it says the 16 ways in which the gods from the pure realms. So the pure realms, if you look at the text that I sent to you, if you look on page, it's on page 2 and it's on page 3, where on page 3 it's got a little bit more detail. So what I've done, I've used the glossary and I've referenced all the different realms, and in the glossary put it into an order so that we can see from the bottom of where the gods begin in the desire realms, going up through the 16 realms of the god, the form realms of the god, into the highest realms, the pure realms of the gods. So we can see that sequence of, how this takes place and so on. So the idea of the gods is within the bodhisattva himself. And that's what's being pointed out here, that as we are developing our own awareness, our own awakening and so on, we're going through those God realms ourselves. And there's a point where there's a parallel crossing between the gods and the bodhisattva way, because the gods were being referenced in the very beginning of the teachings by the Buddha in the Hinayana teachings. But then the bodhisattva was being taught in the Mahayana vehicle. So in the beginning, they were talking about gods. Then in the Mahayana, then they start talking about bodhisattva. So it's interesting to be able to see how this progress works And one of the defining features of the difference between the gods and the bodhisattvas is that the gods are impure in the regard that they have pride. They still have pride. That's what keeps them as gods. And it's part of, who we are, the God realms and so on. So it's part of who we are. But then in the bodhisattva is giving up the afflictions, giving up the mental misconceptions, giving up the habitual tendencies and so on. So the gods, the prideful part of our mind, the prideful part that we're trying to present is recognizing that and is being able to relax back and not allow Mara to grab onto the psyche, if you will, and allow the bodhisattva to rise to the part of fruition to become awakened and so on. So there's this dynamic that is going on. And by reading this and thinking about this and seeing how this play works itself out, I think is very, very mind-opening to ourselves, as we go through this and see, the different phases that we go through our meditation. Anybody got any comment about that? A difference of opinion or anything like that? Okay, one other thing I would say that came to my mind when I was thinking about this, when I was studying this, is the gods have a holiness to them. The bodhisattva has more of a realism about the bodhisattva, because as the bodhisattva, we face that all this is all part of a reality. And the gods are looking at things more in terms of this holiness, this sacredness, this way of how's it put, a class of celestial beings at the head of the assemblies of these non-human beings, and who attend and celebrate the bodhisattva. So if you look at the definition here on the very first page of the handout that I sent to you, is a definition of the gods that comes from the glossary 213. So to understand the gods and everything, this is a wonderful way to be able to understand the progress that we go through of being awakened, of being enlightened, and so on. Okay. So if we can begin reading, let's see. So if Kunga, if you will start with start at 2120, just so that we're going back just one little bit, just to get a stream of consciousness going. 2120. And then continue the rest of that page. And then Bernie, if you would please, if you would read through the second page. And then Matt, if you would read through the third page. And then I'll read through the fourth page. And then Kunga, if you will read again the next page after that, down to and including 21.230. So that section there we'll read, and then we'll have a discussion, and then resume our recitation.
Wait, tell me again what word do you want me to read from? I'll read from 2120 to the end to 2123.
21,200. 21.200.
Oh, 21.200. Okay.
Yeah. So finish that page, then Bernie reads. Then Matt reads, and then I'll read, and then you'll read again.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
All right, so whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Evil one, today you will be depleted of life force by the bodhisattva, like grass and trees by the fire at the end of an eon. Evil one, today you will be crushed by the bodhisattva, like a mountain top by a mighty thunderbolt. Monks, although the gods who attended upon the bodhisattva tried to discourage Mara, the evil one, in these 16 ways, Mara would not be deterred. On this topic, it is said, although hosts of deities ask him to turn back, Antaka does not pay heed. Instead, he says, tear him up, beat him, destroy him, don't let him escape alive. If he is liberated, he will liberate my realm and other realms as well. But the only liberation in store for this mendicant is to get up and flee. The Bodhisattva said, the king of mountains, Mount Meru, may move and all beings may cease to be. All the stars, the planets, and the moon may fall from the sky to the earth. It is possible that all beings may think and act in unison and the great oceans may dry out, but it is impossible that someone like me would ever move from the king of trees. Mara replied, I am Lord of desires and master of the universe. I rule over gods, demigods, humans, and animals. All of them fall under my control. So get up. Since you are in my realm, follow my orders.
Bodhisattva said, if you are a master of sense pleasures, you are clearly not a master at all. Look who I am in reality. I am master of the Dharma. If you are the master of sense pleasures, you should not go to the lower realms. While you watch powerlessly, I shall attain awakening. Mara replied, monk, what are you doing here in the wilderness on your own? It is not an easy task to find what you seek. It's not an easy task to find that which you seek. Burgu and Hyrus and others who exerted themselves in austerities did not attain the supreme state, so forget about you, an ordinary man. The Bodhisattva said, with a mind possessed by anger and full of desire for the divine realms, and a belief that the self is either permanent or impermanent, and the thought that liberation is a place you can go to, with such mistaken preoccupations, past sages practiced austerities. Not knowing the truth, they practice the existence of they preach the existence of a soul, variously claiming that this soul is all pervasive, confined to locations, eternal, with form, without form, with qualities, without qualities, an agent and not an agent. That is what they claimed. But today, sitting here on this seat, I will attain stainless awakening. I will defeat you, Mara, and repel your army and soldiers. I will explain to the world about the origin and arising of things, and also about nirvana, the cool state where suffering is pacified. Mara, upset, angry, and furious, shouted the harsh words, catch that, Gautama, who sits alone in the wilderness, and bring him quickly to me. Take him to my palace, shackle, fetter, and yoke him, and make him my gatekeeper. I will watch him suffer and cry out uncontrollably in many different ways, a slave of the gods. The Bodhisattva replied, it is possible that someone can make drawings in the empty sky, or catch blowing wind with a lasso, or make the bright sun and moon fall from the sky and the earth. Yet of countless beings like you will never make me away from this tree.
The powerful army of demons came forth, with wild cries, playing conches, conchs, and various drums. They asked, when you see this terrifying army of Mara, oh, our son, our dear child, are you not annihilated already? You are as bright as gold from the Jambu River, or the pericarp of the Kampaka flower. You are youthful, praised and honored by gods and humans. But today you will meet your doom in this great battle. You will come under the control of Mara, like the moon seized by the demigod. With the voice of Brahma and the call of the cuckoo bird, the well-gone one spoke to the hordes of yaksas and rakshasas. He who hopes to remove someone like me from this perfect tree is a fool who tries to frighten space itself. No one can harm me here beneath this tree, not even someone who can destroy the Drikung and count its motes of dust, not even someone who can draw all the water in the oceans through a single straw, not even someone who can split the supreme diamond mountain in a single instant. Mara, being thus restrained, became angry. He held aloft his unsheathed sharp sword. Monk, quick, get up and do as I tell you, or I will cut you right away like a bamboo twig or durva grass. The bodhisattva replied, even this trichilocosm were filled with demons, and each of them brandished a sword as large as Mount Meru. They could not bend a hair in my body, let alone kill me. Do not disbelieve me. I am reminding you of my firm resolve. With faces of camels, oxen and elephants, and terrifying eyes, with venomous snakes for arms and horrible poisonous eyes, they hurled erupting volcanoes at him, as well as trees with their roots, and copper and iron.
They gathered like clouds from the four directions, roaring and raining down bolts of lightning, iron balls, swords, spears, sharp axes, and poisoned arrows. They shattered the earth's surface and pulverized trees. Some had 100 hands and shot 100 arrows. From their mouths they shot out poisonous snakes and fire, while seizing crocodiles and other aquatic creatures from the ocean. They transformed into Garudas and pounced as snakes. Infuriated, some hurled iron balls the size of Mount Sumeru, as well as blazing mountain peaks. Hitting the ground, they made the earth quake and stirred up the underground masses of water. Some jumped in front of him, and some attacked him from behind, yelling out, "You child!" They attacked from left and from the right. Their hands and feet were turned the wrong way, and their heads were afire. Blazing lightning bolts sprang forth from their eyes. As he witnessed this army of demons, ugly with unnatural forms, this pure being understood that they were like an illusion. There is no Mara here, no army, no being, and also no self. Like the moon reflecting in a pond, so does this threefold universe revolve. There is no I, no man, no woman, and no self. There is no ear, no nose, no tongue, and no body. No one created these phenomena, and no one experiences them. They arise in dependency and are empty both from within and without. As he proclaimed the truth that phenomena are empty, the Yakshas, who are agreeable to discipline, perceive the weapons in their hands to be flower garlands. Such was the result of the words spoken by the one who always speaks the truth. He gracefully ran his right hand over his body from head to toe, the hand which was adorned with a fine web, which had beautiful copper-colored nails, sparkling like gold from the Jambu River, and was marked with a 1,000-spoked wheel, and was auspicious with the merit of virtue.
He stretched out his hand like a lightning bolt striking from the sky, and said, "This earth is my witness. In the past I made millions of elaborate sacrifices and never denied those who petitioned me. Water and fire and wind are my witness, and so are Brahma, the Lord of beings, the sun, the moon, and the stars. The Buddha and the 10 directions are my witness. My disciplined practice and the superior branches of awakening are all my witness. Generosity, discipline, and patience are my witness. Diligence, concentration, and knowledge. The 4 limitless contemplations and the 5 higher knowledges are all my witness. In fact, all the gradual practices of awakening are my witness. However many beings there are in the 10 directions, with all their strength of merit, discipline, and wisdom, and all their many unrestricted sacrifices, they do not equal even 100th of the qualities in a single hair of mine." He gracefully touched his hand to the earth so that the earth resounded like a copper vase. As Mara heard this, he fell to the ground, and then heard the words, "Strike, catch this fiend of darkness."
Okay,
Go on?
yes. No, please, let's pause here.
Okay.
So this section here is this this increasing intense conversation with Mara. Both the bodhisattva is having conversation, but also the gods are having conversation. So, does anybody have any comment about this? What does this mean to you? How do you see this? Have you experienced this? Do you think about this? As you're meditating, and what is it that pulls you back from your meditation? Is it thoughts of something that we might describe as Mara, demons that are pulling us away from seeking completion of our meditation? Bernie, would you comment?
Well, I certainly can't relate any of that to my experience. I'd shit my pants if I saw Mara while I was meditating. I don't see demons when I close my eyes when I'm meditating, fortunately. So, well, we have several levels of possible attachments that come here. First, we have to the temptation of the daughters of Mara, and then we have a sort of an argument between the different sides of Mara's retinue, and if I remember correctly from 2 weeks ago. And now we finally have the final assault where it's really the fear of death and dismemberment. And it's what we would call, well, what they would have called in the LSD days, a bad trip. And it's the final battle of ego is to put a fear in people of its non-existence. And you're going to die if you continue with this meditation, because you are your ego, and if your ego dies, you're dead as well. That's how I interpret this, but I can't say, I don't want to talk too much about my meditation experience, but generally, the truth comes almost silently and very quietly. There's not a big titanic battle, at least in my experience. It's more like an aha moment. Oh, that's what it's like when you see something accurately for the first time. And so I can't really say that in my meditation experience I have anything like this kind of titanic struggle, but that the Buddha was supposed to have had when he sat down for the final night before his enlightenment.
Thank you. Gunga, do you have any comment?
I think mostly when in my meditation I struggle with distracting mundane thoughts about what my plans are later in the day or something that happened recently. So my Mara is much more mild. doesn't have this dramatic effect. It's a struggle sometimes. It's more. I feel like the distracting thoughts. My meditation is just filled with distracting thoughts. Versus sometimes it's more I'm just sitting in the moment. But it's never. I haven't experienced as exciting a meditation as the Buddha does. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, do you have any comment about this?
I guess how it shows up for me, there's the experience on the meditation cushion, but I guess I'm thinking about it even more broadly in my life. And I think, and certainly to everyone's point, I don't have these dramatic experiences like they're describing with the Buddha and Mara. But I think the idea of Mara, I think it comes up for me a lot in just this kind of push and pull with like being dedicated to Dharma practice, having it be central, and having it be this peripheral thing, and then having all this other stuff be central. It's like this, through all of the attachments, this desire or belief or this pull that I'm going to make samsara work out. I think that's this kind of pull. I'm going to, this feels really good. I'm going to feel good enough. I'm going to do well enough at work. People are going to praise me enough. It's like things are feeling pretty good. It's a lot of times it takes kind of that form, if that makes sense for me, of like the things pulling me away from Dharma practice. But I will say, I guess what Bernie was saying made me think of, I have had one experience a long time ago while doing a retreat actually, where I did feel the ego kind of slip away, and to a large degree. And I've had a few experiences like that, but this one had like this terror to it, this terror of like kind of like annihilation or something, that Bernie's comment made me think of.
Yeah, I think, what's being dramatized here, I think that's a good word for it. This dramatic thing that's happening is in our lives today, we've had the benefit or we've had the experience of many more lifetimes, 2,600 years more lifetimes than the bodhisattva had. So there's been more time for us to be able to soften, our seat of awakening, to not be, not have all this drama here. We're more familiar with the process and so on, and we're coming to a point in our life now where it's coming to even finer points and so on, and there's more joy, there's more happiness in the process, there's more guidance. The bodhisattva didn't have any real guidance except that which he brought himself. So it's being characterized in this drama that's going on and so on. And, he talks about in 21.222, he's talking about, the witness of the army of demons and so on trying to come to him. And then he finally, the bodhisattva says, look, there's no Mara, there's no army. All this is going on within my own head. All this is going in within my own mind. But for someone who's not initiated, someone who's not familiar with it, and I think Bernie might have said, somebody who's on a bad trip or having a bad meditation or something like that, there's the sense that maybe you're losing your mind. All the reality, everything that I thought was real and everything is not real. And it's like, wow, what am I doing? It's like being in a sense deprivation, is that what you call it? Deprivation, something like that. And so there's the risk that you're losing your mind. But meanwhile, he had the six paramitas to fall back on in 228. Verse 21.228, he's talking about the six paramitas. He's talking about generosity, discipline, patience, are my witness, diligence, concentration, and knowledge, the four limitless contemplations, which are the four immeasurables, the five higher knowledges, which are the super knowledges, and talking about the gradual practices for awakening are my witness. So he had these techniques that he was able to articulate, that he was able to identify and use, and to rescue him, if you will, from further sense that he's losing his mind, that he's losing, he was aware, he was totally aware of what was going on, that he was purifying, the Mara, he was purifying these demons and so on. And he had a way in which to do that. But still, by we get to the end of 230 here, 21.230, Mara is still trying everything that Mara can to to win over the bodhisattva, to conquer the bodhisattva. But the bodhisattva continues to resist the actions of Mara and his army and his sons and daughters and so on like that. But Mara is still trying to move the bodhisattva from the seat of awakening. So we come to any comments or thoughts?
I thought it was interesting, in the other stories I've read or heard that he called the earth as the witness, but that was it. It ended there. But I've read other places that a lot of times they'll just have the beginning. They'll just use the beginning of a list of things and they'll just list that as a shorthand. So I could see where the earth is just the first of the four elements, and then all these other parts are added on to it. I think that for me, it's more meaningful to have the practice witness is supported by the paramitas and the four immeasurables than it is just to have it witnessed or supported by the earth.
So the metaphor of the witness by the earth, how would you define that? How would you characterize that?
Mean as if the earth were the only witness and it didn't have any other witnesses listed?
Well, is it the earth that is the witness? Is it the physicality of the earth? Or in my mind comes up that it's phenomenal nature, that all the other beings that are in phenomenal nature, that are worldly beings, they're the witnesses to this. So in other words, it's not being done in a vacuum. It's being done in the presence of phenomenal existence. And what the bodhisattva is realizing is the transcendence, moving away, moving up from that, but the witnesses, those that are watching this and so on, they become
Well, as I understand it, evoking the earth as a witness is sort of the testimony from his previous lives, all the accumulation of merit from his previous lives that's going on. It's not the witness of the current day. It's like the earth has been here for a long, long time and remembers everything that I did in my previous lives. So all the lives where I practiced the six paramitas, for example, see my huge accumulation of merit that he's referring to when he evokes the earth as his witness.
Yes, thank you very much. That's what I was struggling to be able to say. But yes, the witness that all those lifetimes that are seeing the transformations, that are experiencing the transformations, going up through the different levels and so on of the transformations.
I always see the earth as a reference to interdependence, in that, every living thing arises from the earth, every living thing goes back to the earth at death. And then I see that him saying the earth as a witness is it's just a recognition of interdependence, and that, everything his interconnected with everything else, and all the causes and conditions that led up to that point are the witness to his being where he is. Versus oh, it's my ego that accomplished this. There is no, the ego is that's a temporary delusion. It's his recognition of interdependence and cause and effect that's the witness. I guess that's how I put it. Thank you.
What if, going through those transformations, going through those lifetimes and so on, that are riddled with afflictive emotions, or all these involvements with other beings, other situations, lifetimes of those things. So that involvement with other beings and so on, they become like mirrors to ourselves, or they become causes for us to either fall down, or to be able to say, oh, this is suffering and I need to be able to rise above the suffering. They become the impetus, they become the catalyst for moving ahead, moving forward, and so on, like that. So it's through those lifetimes and so on that become inspiration for the bodhisattva to continue to move to, purification, to the realization of awakening. Does that make sense? So I think it's the Dharma practice. Maybe it's an assumptive thing to say or whatever, but the four of us that are here right now, and a few of the other people who often join us and everything, to get to this point, we have gone through long periods of purification. We have been studying the Dharma and practicing the Dharma in prior lifetimes, so to speak, not as Lance or not as Matthew or Bernie or Kunga, but as part of the human experience. And we are, at this point, we are characters of that human experience at this point, with the benefit of those things. And, we're closer to enlightenment than we might think we are. It's just a matter of changing our attitude, changing our mind. Okay. Anybody got any other thoughts before we move on?
I'll just say real quick, it also made me think these passages about just really re-emphasizing the centrality and importance of the insight of no self, or anatta, and emptiness in the Buddhist teachings and on the path.
Indeed, yes. Okay, so let's pick it back up at 231. So Kunga, if you will finish this page at 231, and then Bernie is next page 234, and so on. And if Bernie, if you'll just finish,
Okay.
carry on then. So Kunga, will you begin?
As Mara's body started to sweat, his splendor disappeared and his face grew pale. Mara now saw himself overcome by old age. He beat his chest and cried out in fear, with no protector in sight. Mara's mind was confused and his thoughts befuddled. His elephants, horses, conveyances, and chariots all fell to the ground. The yaksas, kambandas, and flesh eaters were terrified and ran. Disoriented, they could not find their way and without resting place or protection. They fled like birds seeing a forest fire. Parents, children, sisters, and brothers asked about them. Where were they seen? Where have they gone? And in this way, they started to argue and fight with each other. Such suffering has befallen us, and there are no prospects for living.
The great army of demons, so utterly unshakable, was now all gone, dispersed and no more together. For 7 days they did not see each other, and when they finally did see their phantasmal forms, they said, "Great to see you alive." The goddess of the tree felt compassion. She took her vase with water and sprinkled the friend of darkness. "Quick, get up. You must depart without delay, for that is what happens to those who pay no heed to the words of the master." Mara replied, "I did not listen to the kind and helpful advice of my sons, and offended against a perfectly pure being. Therefore I now reap suffering, fear, misfortune, grief, ruin, lamentation, loss of honor, and this miserable state." The goddess replied, "A fool who offends against those who are faultless shall himself meet with many troubles, fear, suffering, calamities, misery, lamentation, murder, and bondage. The leaders of gods, demigods, Garudas, Kinnaras, and Rakshasas, Brahma, Indra, and the gods of the heaven of making use of others' emanations, and the heaven of joy all proclaimed his victory and called out, "You have conquered Mara's army. Hero of the world, be victorious." They offered garlands of pearls, crescent moons, parasols, flags, and banners, and showered him with flowers and powders of aloe, tagara, and sandalwood. They played music and song. Sit at the tree, O hero, O lion who conquers his enemy. At this supreme seat you have conquered with love the wicked army of demons. Hero, today you shall attain awakening. The 10 powers, the unique qualities, the distinct realizations, and the experience of a Buddha you shall attain today. In order to tame Mara, you entered this battle. There were 360 million beings who witnessed the power and might of a perfect bodhisattva, and 240 million who formed the wish for the perfect awakening of a Buddha.
This concludes the 21st chapter on conquering Mara. So so the goddesses, have great compassion for the Mara and his and those that were arguing between themselves the different aspects of Mara and so on. They had great compassion for that, while at the same time was encouraging the bodhisattva.
Yeah, Mara has a tough job because, without Mara, we couldn't have the Buddha. But Mara always has to be the bad guy. We have to feel sorry for him.
Well,
It's a rotten roll. Somebody has to do it. I guess we're all our Maras in our own at some point in our life, so we all get to experience it.
How would you define the difference between gods and the goddesses?
gods and goddesses?
Yeah.
Well, one is male and the other is female. What's the difference? That's
Okay.
the obvious explanation.
That's one distinction. What else might
Well,
that be?
what we're thinking of, the goddess here is really some spirit who's inhabiting the tree, right? So
Right.
that would seem to be a spirit of a lower order, some sort of nature spirit rather than a god in the god realms in this case.
Well, they're speaking of specifically here. They say on 238, it says the heaven of making use of others' emanations, and then the heaven of joy. So the heaven of joy is a fourth level god.
That's Tushita, the realm
That's Tushita. That's right.
which the Bodhisattva came from before he was born here, right?
That's right. But that is part of the 6 desire realm gods. The 6 desire realm gods. So it's in here. You can look it up in the glossary and so on. The heaven of making use of others' emanations is the 6th level of the 6 desire realm gods. Making use of others' emanations. In other words, being adept at being able to say, oh, Kunga has done a very good job at being able to get himself to a level. He's gone through many things, and I can benefit from those things by practicing them, by understanding what they mean and so on, and following his example, using the jewels that he's left behind. Is the way the heaven of making use of others' emanations is defined in the glossary. So being adept at being able to do that. Before that, the one in the middle, between the 4th and the 5th, is the level of being making your own emanations. your own, I mean, how do they say it here? Excuse me a second. Delighting in emanations, the heaven of delighting in emanations, your own emanations. But then the next level is other gods' emanations. So it's like here, we're all at some kind of level. We get benefit from talking to each other because some of us have a different way of looking at it, and we're looking at each other's emanations and talking about it, and it may inspire us to move up a notch, something like that. So the point is, of course, to include this into your meditation. These things aren't, for me anyway, I can't glean all this from one reading. I need to think about this. I need to study this. I need to contemplate this and then have meditation on it and be able to experience it. And so that's what this whole play in full is about, is being able to show us, the steps that the bodhisattva who became Buddha took to be able to be able to liberate oneself.
Can I make a comment, Lance?
Certainly.
I like the part about the goddess with the compassion for Mara, and I think, from my perspective at least, one thing I don't love as much about this framing of like going to war with Mara or the conquering of Mara, is, yeah, I mean, like, I guess psychologically speaking, or like when I'm working with people, like in therapy, I think often one of the most important things is like, we have these different parts of ourselves, these different patterns in ourselves, a lot of which formed and early in our life. Some of the non-adaptive ones are, the results of different traumas, different things that, that we've experienced. And that often the, like the stopping of going to war with ourselves and this kind of tension and this like battling, or if there's anxiety or something, I'm going to fight the anxiety, I'm going to battle it, I'm going to like the kind of embracing, put our arm around, acceptance, things like this, of this internal war. So if Mars is representing these ultimately unskillful, ultimately in the nature of suffering parts of ourselves, I think there's something powerful that can push towards transcendence, of having compassion, of changing the stance and having compassion towards these parts of ourselves, a lot of which we came about honestly through, difficult experiences in our lives, or it could be past lives, whatever it may be. So that's one thing I was thinking about, and it triggered it with hearing the goddess with the compassion for Mar.
Were you making another point about the aspect of battles and this war, this warrior aspect that goes on? Does that fit in with what you were saying? Would you use that analogy today with some of your patients?
No, I guess the point I was making was not liking that analogy of the battle as much, and the like the goddess was doing. I think there's something to having seeing clearly, and then having the compassion towards Mara, to the Mara within ourselves, which might be my own impulses, my self-loathing, my whatever, egotism, all of these things. I think having compassion and having a lighter touch, and not going to war with it, having parts of ourselves going to war and battling, which creates this inner tension. I think this kind of psychic tension, and can keep us stuck. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm describing it, but that's kind of the thing I was trying to point to.
Well, do you think that goes to, here we are 2,600 years later, looking at these things, and it's uncanny, the wisdom that is here, that is relevant to our contemporary time and so on. But at the same time, is it not part of our job, if you will, being on the bodhisattva path, to kind of refine things, to kind of purify things, to make things maybe more palatable, to beings that might otherwise not be able to reconcile that? and to be able to use our experience and our wisdom to find the methods to be able to explain these things to other people who might be offended or might be, driven into confusion, if we look at it just as the battle or something like that. So in other words, there's another way to express these things, and we represent that. We're part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently bad about. I mean, if it's helpful to view it as a battle for someone, then I think
Someone it might be, yeah.
then that's all to the good. I guess I don't know how far we want to go down the rabbit hole, but I think in our culture, and maybe just modern culture, modern Western culture, there's a real big issue with feelings of self-hatred, self-loathing, shame, things like this, where it's like the psyche is kind of at war with itself at different parts in a way that I think might be, I think, a little bit different than in other cultures who have their own, whatever, their own issues. Maybe traditional cultures or even Eastern cultures, more traditional Eastern cultures. I remember I don't know if this is a real story or not, but I've heard the story when the Dalai Lama came to America or to the West, one of his early times. The people in the crowd were asking them about, what do I do about like the self-loathing and self-hatred and self-incrimination or something, and he had trouble understanding the concept at first because it was a very foreign concept. Now again, that might not be a real story, it might just be one that I've heard from people, but something like that, I guess, is again kind of what I'm pointing to.
I wanted to say that it's just a one-sided battle in the story. I mean, the battle, Mara brings the battle on, but the Buddha doesn't respond in any aggressive way at all. The arrows and the boulders and all the weapons are thrown, but they just turn into flowers. Even when the goddess come and present all their desires, there's still no pushing away by the Buddha. He just kind of accepts the display and then starts to teach them. So I think that's still relevant to today. That we have we have parts of ourselves that we feel like are problematic, and here the Buddha is saying, well, you can transform these parts of yourself with wisdom. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to beat them down. You don't have to deny that they exist. You can just observe them with awareness, and then through that awareness, you transform things. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, and that is in line with kind of the spirit of what I'm getting at. I guess you're right. In this story, the Buddha isn't fighting Mara in that way. Yeah, so that is kind of implicit or not explicit and implicit in the thing. So that's a good point. Yeah.
I think going back to the question about the difference between the goddesses and the gods, and I think Bernie said, and I agree, because it's in the text, is that the goddesses are reflections, are symbolic of the earth, the earth itself, the firmament, that they are speaking from that point of view, and the earth is totally forgiving. We can do all kinds of things. Humans can do all kinds of things to the earth. Other animals can do other things to the earth and so on. Fire can come, earthquakes can come and so on. But invariably, after some period of time, the earth continues to restore itself. And that's an example of the goddesses having compassion, for the earth or from the earth, that kind of compassion. The gods, the male gods then, they have compassion to a degree that's a little more ethereal. I haven't been able to find the right words to think about this, to be able to say this, but their activity, the maleness is always expressed in terms of actualization, and the femaleness is always expressed in terms of the firmament, that we are born from the mother, we're born from the earth, but then we carry on our work as in a male sense, in a masculine sense. And, so it's more thoughts and so on. It's less about the firmament and more about the ethers or the energy itself, something like that. Does that make any sense?
Well, it
Well,
may just be a hold off from a male dominated culture that,
well,
prejudices male energy over female energy, but they're still just words describing the, concepts. I don't know how much it matters to gender really, to
yeah,
myself.
generally we associate feminine with nature, as in the expression Mother Nature, and the masculine is more associated with the sky. It's Mother Earth and Father Sky. I think that's true in most cultures. Now, sometimes you have things weirdly backwards because, you know, a lot of languages are very gendered. English is not a gendered language, but for instance, sun and moon have different genders in different languages, but generally it's the earth is feminine and the sky is masculine, as in at least in Indo-European languages, I think. So it's there's an association there that's really on a emotional level, and I don't think it's mistaken at that level. So
Are Pali and Sanskrit gendered languages? Did you say?
yeah, very much so, very much so. Most Indo-European languages are gendered. Yeah, generally it's the it's like Spanish. It's the final vowel that tells you what the gender is in Sanskrit and Pali. And the long vowels are words that end in long vowels are feminine, words that end in short vowels are masculine or neuter. You have neuter in Sanskrit as well. So, and I assume also in Pali. So,
Yeah, I learned French when I was in school. I was terrible in it, but they have prefixes, the la and the lay, which are the masculine, feminine descriptors of the word that's coming next. So how do you tell whether a tree is a masculine or a feminine tree, and so on like that. That was one of the things that always befuddled me.
yeah, well, there's a famous essay on that by Mark Twain when he tried to learn German and try to figure out what the genders are for different words. He said it made no sense. Yeah, it's a funny. In Spanish, it's pretty straightforward because of the final vowel. Also in Sanskrit, but then if it ends in a consonant, you have to guess. So, but there aren't many nouns that end in consonants in Sanskrit.
Okay, thank you. Zara, good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, are you all? Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be back and be part of the gang. I saw that you were resuming at 100. Have you already read the section for this evening and are in discussion?
Correct. We started at 200.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, where did you stop?
Well, we're at the end of the chapter now. We're at 242.
Okay. Oh, you've concluded it for the evening. Okay, I understand. Okay.
So we're still talking.
No,
So
no, I mean you're done reading so you
yeah,
complete.
we recited that. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank
So
you.
I just want to make a point that the end of this, which is begins with 240, 21.240, and it says then here today you shall attain awakening. Then the next page says the 10 powers, the unique qualities, the distinct realizations, and the experiences of a Buddha you shall attain today. So I think it's really interesting and important to know what are the 10 powers, what are the unique qualities, what are the distinct realizations, and so on. So, going back to our glossary, the 10 powers are listed on G662. So referring to that is going to help you very much in understanding where the bodhisattva is at this point. Then the next one, the unique qualities. The unique qualities would be G196. And that would be the four means of attracting disciples. This is the point where the bodhisattva is able to be an influence in other people's lives and to be able to do that. So these are unique qualities that the bodhisattva, that the Buddha, the awakened one, has. So knowing that, so that's on page one, or glossary 196. Then the next one, the distinct realizations, would be the noble truths, the realization of suffering, the causes of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the Eightfold Path that is the cause for the cessation of suffering. So that would be on G197. So going back and looking at these things is part of the study. And then the next line, it says, and the experiences of a Buddha you shall attain today. So what does that mean? It's the spontaneous presence when all of this all comes together and there is this epiphany, the aha moment where all this comes together and the clarity comes and so on. And as we are approaching that, as we're doing our practices, we have moments of that kind of clarity. We have those spontaneous present moments, but then it may not be stable and it fades away, sometimes as quick as it came. Sometimes it fades away over an hour, sometimes over a day or 2 days or a week or something like that, but we begin to more and more experience and stabilize those experiences of what it is to be a Buddha, an awakened one. So knowing these qualities here, knowing these aspects, knowing the 10 powers, the unique qualities, the distinct realizations, all are what becomes clear with so many other things in that spontaneous presence. So it behooves us to want to take a look at that. So then the next verse, it says, in order to tame Mara, you entered this battle. There were 360 million beings who witnessed, and the power might be of a perfect bodhisattva. 240 million who formed the wish of this perfect awakening of a Buddha. So we approach it as a bodhisattva, and it yields itself to become a Buddha. Any comments or thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to comment on the four means of attracting disciples: generosity, kind talk, meaningful action, and practicing one preaches. I appreciate that simple approach. A lot of things, the 10 powers, hard to latch on to, but those four, I think, are easy to see and easy to put into practice, in concrete ways. Thank you.
Did you read those again?
Yeah.
It's on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Generosity, kind talk, meaningful actions, and practicing what one preaches.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that too.
Do you have the glossary? You've got a copy of that, Matt. It's the fourth book. It's the fourth. Huh?
I do. I'm being lazy. I heard it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, the glossary is as great as any part of this Lalitavistara. The glossary is magnificent.
Sometimes, Lance, I found that the glossary is in and of itself worth like just reading it as its own textbook, because it's so rich in content, and it leads you off these little trails of and you start self-discovery of, oh, what's that reference? And you really become masterful at the content.
Yes.
Yeah, so I learned that in the book you sent me, for the Yogini book, I started going through the references, and then I started finding all these other things, and it was great to be empowered with source material. It's changing. It changes your level of conceptual and then experiential when you can trace it back. So I'm so grateful you included it for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bernie, what do you think about that as scholarly as you are? You know, these texts and the glossaries and the notes and so on, how important have they been to you in your career as being a
Well,
Buddhist and a practitioner and
it's
a student and so on?
sometimes the glossaries are very helpful, especially when there's lists of, Buddhism is famous for its long list of things, the 32 marks of a Buddha and all that. Uh, and So yeah, it's helpful to see what the lists are. Sometimes you shake in your head at trying to figure it out even after you read the list. But I mean, generally at this point, I know the basic terminology of Buddhism. So sometimes there's so much that you're always learning something new, but it's it's the stuff that's really subtle that's hard to get a grasp on, like emptiness, rather than these lists. Uh, just like you, I'm curious about the different levels of the God realms and what's going on in each one of them. But it really isn't going to help you in your meditation practice to know all that, really. It's just general curiosity, like curiosity about anything else. You want to know more about it. At least as part of my personality, I want to know all this stuff. But the really important stuff can't be put in a glossary. Is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And but of course, if you're trying to understand these traditional scriptures, you really do need access to some sort of knowledge, because otherwise you'll just get snowed under by all this terminology and you'll wonder what's going on. Is
Thank
that
you.
a is that a confusing enough answer for you?
Well, we may not have the benefit of a real live, teacher, nearby that we can ask questions of, and having these books and so on is a great resource, and it becomes that equivalent, and sometimes it's better than, I think, having a teacher
Yeah.
who, is we have such close accessibility to, because the process of researching is the process of investigation and so on like that, and going through and eliminating mental misconceptions and giving ourselves the time to figure it out.
Yeah.
If you call up your teacher or you meet your teacher, and you say, well, what's this, that, or the other thing? And he gives you this 5-minute explanation, and you say, oh, yeah, 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 I got it. And then you walk out of the room and it's gone. But if you learn how to research these things and use these textbooks, I mean, the definition of an educated person
Yeah.
is that person knows how to reference
Right.
material.
Well, I agree with you. As well, I don't say it out loud, but I've always believed that if you want to understand any subject, well, this is just basic scholarship. You have to go to the primary material. You have to read the basic texts as they were written and not read somebody's explanation of the basic texts. It might be a good start to read the secondary text, but if you really want to know a subject, you have to learn from the primary materials, and that means you're going to need the sort of helps that the glossary provides to get a better understanding of what's written in the material. And of course, in any translation, you have to wonder about the terminology that's used in the translation, because especially in Buddhism, the terminology differs so much from translator to translator. you can get a completely different understanding of a text based on who the translator is. Now, a word of caution. It's I've seen so many people, well, not so many, I've seen a lot of people who've come to all sorts of really peculiar ideas about Buddhism, especially about Zen, because Zen's a little harder to understand intellectually just from their reading. And I always wonder, as confused as these people are, am I just as confused as they are, but on a deeper level?
Who are these people?
So it's people ask questions and talks about Buddhism, and they just have the whole thing completely wrong because they read something and they misunderstood it completely in talks by different teachers. It's always amazing when there's a talk given, an introductory talk given on Buddhism, because you get all sorts of questions, and really the most interesting one, because they're coming at it with a completely different direction than somebody's been associated with Buddhism for a long time. But people do come up with the worst mistakes after reading Buddhist texts, and they have to be set right. And I always wonder, am I so much different from them, just at a different level? I'm misunderstanding it at a deeper, at a more subtle level than they are. So, I mean, the ultimate guide to Buddhism is, Buddhism is really, it's the transmission of enlightened mind from teacher to disciple. And you're never going to understand the whole thing if you try to just understand it on your own. That's why there's always such an emphasis on the guru in Buddhism. I mean, at least in Tibetan Buddhism, in most forms of Buddhism, I think, because it's all pointing to that, and the experience is so much beyond our ordinary conceptual framework that there's bound to be some misunderstanding if you just go at it from a purely intellectual point of view, no matter how good a scholar you are. You're not going to get to the heart of it without some practice of meditation yourself. And I found through the years, the more I meditated, the easier it has been to understand the traditional Buddhist texts. I really didn't have any understanding what they were getting at all. For example, when I first read about the six paramitas, I thought, well, this is kind of intellectual game they're playing here. Nobody really practices that way. And then you meet somebody who's an accomplished teacher, and you say, no, really, the six perfections is a living practice. It's something that everybody can practice. It's not really just words or concepts in a book. It's something that you can really sit down and practice. And that's what happened between when I read The Jewel Ornament of Liberation for the first time, and I met with a teacher who could explain it to me.
Yeah, and I think that's, the distinction between the intellectual and the experiential of, doing the meditation, doing the practice, brings the two together. They're both important. You can be meditating on misconceptions, and it doesn't necessarily self-correct, but through the guidance of the intellectual aspect, whether it's you're opening a book or whether you're speaking with your teacher, your guru or whatever, to help you to do that. And then you're experiencing it, you're having the gnosis, your own knowledge of it, through the practice. So yeah, so I think it's all very important. And one of the things that's always been inspirational to me are the biographies, whether they're autobiographies of the great masters or they're written biographies, of those who came afterwards about these great masters. But learning, they're just like us. You know, they start out like us, and they continue to be just like us, and they show, you know, what it is to go through the changes of being a holy person, of being a person who deals with reality and so on, and reason, and to be able to understand all of that, but then also to have that experience of the non-conceptual, and be able to see the validity of doing that, and have the faith and the courage to be able to deal with that. Any other comments?
Yeah, as far as the teacher-student relationship, I think that there's teachings in Buddhism that say if you're a good student, everything that you encounter is your teacher. And the most important part of meditation is what you take off the cushion into real life, everyday life. You can't. I mean, there's a certain level of experience that's open to you on the cushion, but if you can't take that and use it to transform your life, it's not really doing a lot for you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So what we have been studying up to this point has been conquering Mara, understanding, you know, what Mara is, what Mara brings, the obstacles of what Mara has, and so on like that, and how to overcome Mara, you know, and by being resolute in our position on the seat of awakening, you know, and next, so that's what's all being explained here in this chapter 21. And then we come to chapter 22, which is the perfect and complete awakening itself. So this first part, this chapter has got 75 verses in it. So what I've done is broken it down into sections. So we've got a little bit of time. We can read through this first section that I'm going to tell you, and then we can have a short discussion, and then probably we'll pick it back up again next week. But I think to be able to leave ourselves with a taste of what the awakening is going to keep us inspired through this next week and so on. This is the kind of stuff for myself. As I was reading this, I couldn't help but keep reading. I wanted to finish this whole thing because the story was so compelling, was so great. And I've heard the story, I've told the story many, many times, but to see it all here in a context, in print, and so on, all comprehensive together, is really magnificent. All the things that I've learned, all the things that I've experienced and everything is all here. You know, so it's really very, very, very powerful, and it's the kind of thing that you read over and over and over again. So let's begin, if we can, please. Let me see. We left off with Bernie. Yeah. So Matt, would you read the first page, 21.1 through the first page, and then Zara, I'm going to you have an opportunity to read. So I presume you have your book with you, Zara? All right. So will you read from 22.4 to the end of the section of that page? And then I can read let me see here. Yeah, Zara, you read that. Then I'll read just the next up through 22.10. And I will stop there, and then we'll have a short discussion. So there's a lot there in that first part. So it's Matt, then Zara, and then Lance. Okay, and please read this slowly, meaningfully, because it's a lot. And when we speed up too much, we don't pronounce the words right. We can't understand the words. If we didn't have the books, we wouldn't understand it. And particularly for the people on YouTube who do not have the books, if they're listening and they can't understand the words, it's like a foreign language to them. They get discouraged and turn it off. So we want to make it engaging for everybody. So I always like to use the analogy that we're reading to an 8-year-old group of children, and with some kind of expression to get them involved in what's being said and so on. So Matt, when you're ready, will you begin?
Sorry. Chapter 22, Perfect and Complete Awakening. Monks, once the bodhisattva had destroyed his demonic opponents, vanquished his enemies, triumphed in the face of battle, and raised high the parasols, standards, and banners of conquest, he settled into the first meditative concentration. That state is free from desires, free of factors connected with evil deeds and non-virtues, accompanied by thought and analysis, and imbued with the joy and pleasure born of discernment. When he had brought about the cessation of thought and analysis, he became perfectly quiet in and of himself, and therefore his mind became concentrated. Through this, he settled into the second meditative concentration, which is free of thought and analysis, and is imbued with the joy and pleasure born of meditative absorption. Through disenchantment with joy, he remained impartial, maintained mindfulness and introspection, and experienced physical pleasure. He thus settled into the third meditative concentration, which is unconnected with joy. The noble ones call such a person the impartial one dwelling on pleasure that is imbued with mindfulness. Through relinquishing pleasure at that moment, and having formerly relinquished pain in the past, both mental pleasure and displeasure vanished. Thus he settled into the fourth meditative concentration, which is perfectly pristine impartiality with mindfulness, unconnected with pleasure or pain. While the bodhisattva's mind, purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, gentle, adaptable, and immovable, was immersed in this way, in the early station of the night, he produced the intent to actualize the knowledge that sees wisdom with the divine eye, and so he directed his mind toward that purpose. The bodhisattva, with the pristine divine eye beyond that of humans, looked at sentient beings. He saw them dying and being born, in all their beauty and ugliness, in favorable and unfavorable circumstances, degenerating or advancing precisely in accordance with their actions. With this understanding, he thought,
Alas, sentient beings engage in negative physical, verbal, and mental conduct. Harboring wrong views, they revile noble ones. As they engage in the actions associated with wrong views, once their bodies collapse and they die, they fall into mad migrations and are born among the hell realms. Yet other sentient beings engage in positive physical, verbal, and mental conduct, harboring the correct view. They do not revile noble ones. Since they engage in the actions associated with the correct view, once their bodies collapse, they die. They are born to pleasant existence in the God realms. In this manner, with his pristine divine eye, beyond that of humans, the Bodhisattva saw sentient beings dying and being born in all their beauty and ugliness, in favorable and unfavorable circumstances, degenerating and advancing respectively, precisely in accordance with their actions. Monks, this was indeed how, during the first station of the night, the Bodhisattva actualized knowledge, removed darkness, and lit the light. Then, while his mind purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, supple, flexible, and immovable, was immersed in this way, in the middle station of the night, the Bodhisattva produced the intent to actualize the knowledge that sees the wisdom of recollecting past lives, and so he directed his mind toward that purpose. In this way, he recollected the previous lives of himself and other sentient beings, starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lifetimes, then 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 more lifetimes, then 100 lifetimes, and 1,000 lifetimes, 100,000 lifetimes, and then many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, 10 million lifetimes, a billion lifetimes, 10 billion lifetimes, a trillion lifetimes, and a quadrillion lifetimes, then several billion, tens of billions, several trillions, several quadrillions of lifetimes, all the way up to lifetimes in the eon of destruction, an eon of formation, an eon of both destruction and formation, and several eons of both destruction and formation. He remembered the former lives of himself and others in the greatest detail, thinking, in that place I had this name, this surname, this family, this caste, this diet, this lifespan, this state for this duration, experienced these kinds of pleasure and pains. After falling from there, I was born here, and after falling from there, I was born here.
Then, while his mind, purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, supple, flexible, and immovable, was immersed in this way, during the final station of the night, just at the break of dawn, right at the time of night when the morning drum is beaten, the bodhisattva produce the intent to actualize the knowledge that brings suffering and its origin to an end, and realizes the insight that exhausts defilement. And so he directed his mind to that purpose. He thought, how miserable in this world it is to be anguished by birth, old age, sickness, death, departure, and rebirth. But it does not know how to remove itself from this massive heap of pure anguish, marked foremost by old age, sickness, and death. Alas, if only beings understood how to extinguish this massive heap of pure anguish marked foremost by old age, sickness, and death. So here we'll stop for the time being and go back and review this. So, first line, it says, monks, once the bodhisattva had destroyed his demonic opponents, vanquished his enemies, and triumphed over them in battle, raised high their parasols and so on, he settled into his meditations. So here are 4 meditations, 4 concentrations, 4 absorptions. And months ago, we talked about this in another discussion that we had and so on. And these 4 meditations are the first 4 of the 8 meditations of a practitioner, of one who is on the path to become enlightened. So these first 4, the concentration absorption is, here's a short way of conceptualizing. The first one is conceptualizations and discursive thought. That during this meditation, we have conceptualization, we have discursive thought. Discursive thought means that we're kind of analyzing something. We're taking it apart, we're putting it back together again. But we're focused on what that object of thought is. It's not our mind wandering in different directions. It's on a particular object. So with this first meditation, or this first absorption, also there is a great joy, and there is a pleasure of discernment, many pleasures of discernment. And this is where we might be right now. This is where, we're conceptualizing, we're reading conceptual things, we're taking things apart, we're using discursive thought to take things apart, we're trying to put them back together again. And we're very happy about this. We're glad that we're doing this. It's a very joyous thing for us. We look forward to the next time that we can do this, that we can read ourselves and that we can have the conversation. And that there's this pleasure in the discernment, how to do this, what it is that we're doing. So does anybody recognize that? What do you think of that? Matt, what do you think of that?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe start with someone else. I don't really have a comment on it right now.
Okay. Gunga?
Um, I think that the in the text he's talking specifically about meditative experience, but I like the idea of taking that and seeing that how you might be touching that in your everyday life off the cushion as well. But I feel like in the text itself, it's really specifically talking about developing that during for your formal practice. Thank you.
Just to be clear, I am thinking about during the period that you're on the cushion.
Okay. Okay.
I'm thinking, I wasn't thinking about going off and doing it. You may be doing that, but it's specifically about being in meditation, developing the skills of meditation and the results of meditation.
Lance, I'm so sorry. What was the exact question relative to these four contemplations? What is it that you just want our opinion on it?
I'm on the first one.
Right.
And have you had that experience? Do you look at it that way? Can you experience, or can you articulate your experience with conceptualization, discursive thought? Are you having joy with it? And are you developing a discernment?
Yeah, so and help me understand, because I'm bridging the hybrid retreat right now with Drupal. So it was we contemplated a lot of things for present human life. Now we're in impermanence, and so on the cushion, and you and Bernie or whoever can tell me if this is right. I'm able to discern and laugh at all these thought cycles, right? Like, because we had to practice all these different contemplations on impermanence of like different types of impermanences in the inner world, outer world, our head, and all these things. But is that sort of what you're saying? Like, because it's very prescriptive, the process I'm going to, it's like this systematic, but that's essentially what you're getting at, right? Where I can now discern, like, oh, you're having this angry thought, or your stomach is hurting, you have to go pee, or whatever the temporary state is. Is that what you're saying? Like, I can recognize it on the cushion. Is that it?
It's an intellectualization of the process. The first meditation is an intellectualization of it, is a contemplation, and you're enjoying it, and you're developing the pleasure of discernment, of figuring this out.
Yes. So I have joy in discerning the sufferfest, the mechanics of the sufferfest. I'm having joy and like understanding the rule book now, like how tricky Mara is, if you will, allow the playbook Mara is using, essentially. And I'm kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where you get behind the curtain with the wizard and you're like, oh, this is how it's all working. So yes, now I'm sort of just like, oh, okay, I got it. So yes, I find joy in the discernment, the conceptualization. So yes, I'm experiencing that now.
Okay, yeah. So the words that they use are meditative concentration or absorption. That you're absorbed in this process, in this intellectual process, in this first stage. So
would you say this is like from a spiritual roadmap? This is like a spiritual developmental sequence. Like A goes to B goes to C. Like this was laid out in an order. Like you shouldn't be bypassing or jumping through hoops. Like going from 1 to 4. Like this
right.
is laid.
It's a progressive program.
Okay. So right now, what we're saying with the first contemplation is like it's strictly conceptual. The first one. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm somewhere between 1 and 2, but I am enjoying 1 because I'm reading all these books, which is what it is part of the requirement to dive into it. So yes.
Thank you. Bernie, would you like to comment?
Well, yeah, this is more or less a description of the first 4 levels of samadhi here at the beginning of the chapter. And it's pretty standard. I don't know if you're asking me if I've experienced this. Really, no, my meditation is pretty disgustingly poor. But so yeah, this is it's interesting that Buddha decided to do his meditation while in the fourth state rather than any other of the states. And as you see later in this section, is what he uses this power of meditation to sort of cultivate the ability to discern the minds of others, so he can verify in his own experience the law of karma. Really is basically what he's realizing through his practice here, as it's described here. So but yeah, it's just more or less the traditional description of the factors of the different levels of samadhi and the stages you have to go through.
Do you
I
find
don't
yourself, I mean, this is for everybody, do you find yourself in conversation with other people or with, while you're reading and studying or whatever, that you find yourself, saying, oh, well, I'm explaining this in conceptual terms, and I'm talking about, spiritual thoughts, whatever, that I'm conceptualizing it, and I can appreciate that I'm doing that, but also that there is something that is, there, but that becomes a limitation in itself. It is a stepping stone, but at some point that conceptuality is what holds you back.
Yeah, well, all these lists are always somewhat artificial. I mean, you're slicing up a continuum into different discrete steps. It's like anytime you describe any process and break it up to steps, that it becomes sort of artificial and not really exactly what the actual experience is like. I'm pretty sure that it's more like a continuum rather than a discrete set of steps. Yeah, it's at that level, yeah, we're dealing with something which is more an intellectual exercise rather than a lived experience.
Okay. So then the second level, the second meditative concentration, it says here, which is free of thought and analysis, but it's still is still imbued with the joy and the pleasure born of meditative absorption. So we're giving up the conceptualizations. We're trying to get rid of the words and the thoughts that lead to discursive thought and so on, taking things apart and just abiding in the joy, abiding in the meditative absorption. Have you experienced meditation, or have you experienced meditation where when you get up off the cushion, you still got that buzz, you still got that clear mind, that there's, thoughts may come and thoughts may go, but they just come in and go, and you're not thinking about them. You're not worrying about your bank book. You're not worrying about what you're going to eat for dinner. You're not worrying about what you got to do, this, that, or the other thing today or tomorrow, or what you did yesterday. You just have this, to use the common vernacular, you just got this peaceful buzz going on.
Yeah, well, okay. Now, when talking about these levels of samadhi, as I've said before, I'm not sure whether I said it here, but you don't deliberately go from one state to another, because that's kind of conceptual. You just kind of fall into it. That you're going along in the usual meditation, and then suddenly you find yourself in a more serene state, and it lasts forever. However long it lasts, it depends upon your experience of meditation, what level you attain, and how long it lasts is really dependent on how much where your level of practice is at. But it's not like you turn on a faucet and turn it back off, or you touch a button or you punch a button to get to these levels. don't consciously cultivate these levels. It's more like you fall into them in the same way you fall asleep, and it lasts as long as it's going to last. And it could
So
last.
would you say that maybe the first level has a degree of effort to it?
Yeah,
But then as you move along with it, the next step, as you're pointing out, becomes effortless.
yeah. The whole point, well, as meditation is for a beginner, meditation is always kind of on the edge of falling apart. But you will find at times when there will be times when the meditation sort of becomes stable, and it continues more or less on its own, out of its own momentum, and you don't have to do anything to keep it going. You're not continuously fixing it up. You're not continually chasing after your mind to try to bring it back to the object of meditation. It just stays there. And I can definitely say there have been moments, all too few, when I've had that kind of state. But uh, it's not something that you deliberately I don't, at least in my experience, it's not something that you deliberately cultivate. It's just something that just happens when you're ready for it to happen. So,
Thank you. Gunga, what would you have to say about that?
It seems like the Nundro and the visualization practice and using the four preliminaries, that the first part of the practice, the saying the mantras and doing the mala rounds and doing the prostrations, is sort of like that first jhana spot, and then they all seem to go just sitting in a after you at that after that point, then you the second stage seems to be to visualize that meditation deity entering into yourself, into your heart center. Then that seems to be opening the door for that next level of experience. At least in I mean, I have a pretty limited experience, but in those different practices that you've showed us in the Dorje, that seems to be a common thread that I associate with those jhanas as kind of like it sort of is kind of like setting up some instructions about how to get at least to the first two levels. Thank you.
So there's a structure there, and to get to this point, we've had to use the structure, you know, and but still we never vacate the structure, you know, on its own. You know, we don't consciously say, "Oh, I don't need the structure. I'm not going to do that anymore." It just becomes automatic. It becomes very fluid. It just becomes very effortless. This process. By the time you get to this meditative absorption concentration point, it becomes very, very easy and so on like that. You know, and like Bernie is saying, you know, you just flow from one to the next without consciously saying, "Oh, now I'm going to go to the next level." You may, my point is, the first level you may say, "Oh, I'm going to sit down and do meditation now," and that required some effort. But after that, then it just flows on its own.
I don't know. You get to level two though, where you visualize the deity inside of yourself. That seems to be like uh, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It just seems like that's a pretty structured point to enter the second level.
Well,
Like to let the second level be open to that happening, because you're dropping all the things you were doing, all the conceptual thoughts, and you're just saying sit there in emptiness,
and it's
without
saying
any
to get,
other instruction.
and the indication of what it is in that second level is that thought and analysis of thought have gone away. You know, you've used the analysis and the thought that this, you know, the object and the analysis of that in the first level. In the second level, that analysis goes away. Those thoughts go away. Thoughts may come and go, but it's a question of whether you stop them and you focus on them. You know, and the more that you're able to do that, letting them go, the less the thoughts come, and the intensity of the thoughts is less, and so on. That you're able to maintain that buzz that I'm talking about. Maybe that's the wrong word, but that spaciousness. You ever get that spacey kind of a mind, that just free kind of a mind. And there's a great enjoyment with that, you know. And and that you're happy with the meditative absorption. You realize that there is a meditation absorption. There's a pleasure in that. And you realize that, and you're comfortable with it. That's what it says right here in the book. But to get to that, the stages of meditation had to be used to get to this. Go ahead, Zoe. You were going to say
I was
something.
just going to say you perfectly described what I'm going through right now, where you're like it's mastering, it's the conceptual awareness of the thoughts, like they're the passing clouds, but the experiential practice of recognizing for what they are. Like you don't chase them and it's not a problem. Don't try to stop them, just don't chase them into a conversation in your head. And what happens is, I've noticed for myself, the less I chase it, the less of a problem it is in my actual real three-dimensional life. It's like I'm not calling that energy or that karma to me, because it doesn't get past just a simple floating cloud. So then nothing good or bad happens. So the karma becomes neutral. But I'm going through that now, and I'm starting to use just scripted language, just telling myself, laugh at it, right? To try to replace it versus just trying to step out of it. And the work I'm doing on impermanence right now has helped drastically when you start thinking of these things as you're hungry right now, you won't be hungry in 10 minutes, right? Thinking, because thoughts are so difficult, but you can think about your body, you have to go to the bathroom or you're hungry or you have a headache. That's easier to kind of practice with. Because thoughts are just all over the place in your head, and it's hard to get them out of there. So, but thank you for really emphasizing that, because I think that is so key for anyone who may listen to this recording, what you just said. It's not getting rid of the thoughts, it's don't chase them. The better you get at not chasing them, the better your life is.
And then during this phase, you may, like you point out, bodily thing, you got to go to the restroom, you want to go eat something or whatever, so things may happen, but you're not losing that pleasure, not losing that joy. You're not losing that freedom, that spaciousness in your mind. You can go do those things, maybe it takes 5 minutes to do it, and you can still maintain that state of mind, and you can come back on the cushion and sit right back down, and you haven't lost that absorption, that meditative concentration at that state, and so on. So this is being pointed out to us because this is the stages of the awakening. Taking the meditation, using the meditation, and then the awakening comes. We become more and more, able to deal with it, because we're not focusing on what we need to be thinking about and so on. So as we go into the next two absorptions, we'll see that more. So I think at this time right now, we'll leave it right here, and we'll pick this back up next week. We'll start again. But this is, so important. And no matter where we are in our meditative process, in our career, whether we're doing this, for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 15, it's all important to us to be able to recognize, to be able to see this and so on, and understand this for our own self, because we're not perfectly stable. We're on the path, but we're not at the end of the path. So we need to keep coming back to these things. And plus, we need to be able to articulate this to other people. As we become more stable in this, that it's the work of the bodhisattva is to share this with other beings who are interested, and to be able to have ways to articulate this. So the more that we understand it ourselves, that we can explain it to other people when the time is right for them. So I hope that makes some sense. Okay. Any closing thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, then thank you very much. I'll recite the short dedication. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood, enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drikung Kagyu, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. And here, the great Drikung Kagyu is Lord Jigdan Sumgun of the Drikung Kagyu lineage. But it could be any of the great masters. It could be any of these great throne holders and so on. So it's not limited to just one. He is emblematic. He is symbolic. He is the same as Buddha Shakyamuni, as all these other great beings are. So, and we have that potential within ourselves. So it's through the continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara, our samsara. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. Om, ah, hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. It was so good to see everyone.
Yes, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yes, have a great holiday. May everybody be safe. We'll see you all soon.